Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's begin. It was an ordinary Thursday morning in the heart of the city. The underground corridor beneath Fifth Avenue was alive with movement, a constant river of people flowing in both directions. Commuters hurried to catch trains. Retirees walked at a slower pace, heading to medical appointments. Mothers pushed strollers, navigating through the crowd. This corridor was part of the city's rhythm. Thousands of people passed through it every single day. Officer Daniel Rivera had been patrolling this route for 12 years. He knew every corner, every shop, every face that belonged here. He'd seen street performers, lost tourists, the occasional pickpocket. Nothing surprised him anymore. But today, something caught his eye. Two little girls sat on the ground near the far wall, their backs against the cold tile. They were sitting on a flattened piece of cardboard, the kind homeless people used for bedding. Daniel slowed his pace. The older girl had bright red hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She sat perfectly straight, her back rigid, her eyes watching the passing crowd with an intensity that seemed far too sharp for a child. Beside her, a smaller girl, also red-haired, leaned against her sister's shoulder, but it was the little one's appearance that made Daniel's chest tighten. Her face was swollen, puffy. Her cheeks looked bloated, and even from several feet away, Daniel could see that her breathing was labored. Her small body looked distended beneath her oversized shirt. This child was sick, very sick. Daniel changed direction and approached them carefully. "Hey there," he said gently, crouching down a few feet away. "You girls okay?" The older girl looked up. Her eyes were clear but wary, old eyes in a young face. "We're fine," she said quietly. Daniel's gaze moved to the younger child. She was barely conscious, her eyes half closed, her skin pale beneath the swelling. Something in him froze. Not a visible injury, not a wound he could point to, but the unmistakable sight of a child's body slowly failing. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked the older girl. "Emily. And this is your sister?" Emily nodded, adjusting her hold on the smaller girl. "Lily." Daniel studied Lily more closely. The swelling wasn't just in her face, it was in her hands, her feet, her abdomen. This was edema, severe fluid retention, the kind that didn't happen overnight. "How long have you two been sitting here?" Emily hesitated. "A while." "Where are your parents?" Emily's expression didn't change. She didn't look away. She didn't cry. She just took a slow, deliberate breath, like someone choosing words very, very carefully. And then she spoke, her voice low and measured. "My dad tried to help, and failed." Daniel's blood ran cold. The words hung in the air between them. Simple, devastating, impossible to misunderstand. Tried to help, and failed. Daniel looked at Lily again, at her swollen body, at her labored breathing, at the way Emily held her with the practiced grip of someone who'd been doing this for far too long. He didn't hesitate. Daniel reached for his radio immediately. "Dispatch, this is Officer Rivera. I need paramedics at the Fifth Avenue underground corridor, west entrance immediately. Two minors, younger one approximately 3 years old, appears critically ill. Possible medical emergency. Requesting immediate response." Emily's eyes widened slightly. "Are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart, no, you're not in trouble." Daniel's voice was calm, professional, even as his heart pounded. "But your sister needs help. Real help. From doctors. And I'm going to make sure she gets it right away." Within minutes, the underground corridor filled with the sound of approaching sirens echoing through the tunnels. Paramedics rushed in with equipment. People stopped walking. The constant flow of the corridor slowed as everyone turned to look. A paramedic knelt beside Lily, checking her vital signs. Fever of 104. Severe edema. Breathing is shallow. He looked at his partner with concern. "We need to transport immediately." As they carefully lifted Lily onto a stretcher, Emily tried to follow. "I can't leave her." "You can come with us," the paramedic said gently. Daniel helped Emily to her feet. The girl was so thin. When was the last time she'd eaten properly? Slept in a real bed? As the ambulance pulled away, Daniel stood in the corridor, looking at the spot where the girls had been sitting. The cardboard was worn, compressed from days, maybe weeks, of use. There were empty water bottles lined up against the wall, a small backpack with crackers inside. These children had been living here, right here, in one of the busiest corridors in the city. People began gathering, murmuring. I saw those girls yesterday, someone said. I saw them last week, another voice added. I thought someone was taking care of them. Daniel turned to look at the crowd, at the commuters, the retirees, the mothers with strollers, all the people who walk through this corridor every single day, and he thought, they were right here, and everyone just kept walking. The underground corridor transformed within minutes. Paramedics had taken Lily away, sirens echoing through the tunnels, but Officer Daniel Rivera remained, standing near the cardboard where the girls had been sitting, watching as people finally stopped to pay attention. Detective Laura Brennan arrived quickly. She was sharp, experienced, and didn't waste time. Officer Rivera, what do we have? Daniel turned to face her. 2 girls, Emily, age 10, and Lily, age 3. Found them sitting right here. The younger one is critically ill, severe swelling, high fever, difficulty breathing. They just transported her to Metro General. Where are the parents? Daniel pulled out his notepad. That's the question. The older girl said something when I asked. She said, my dad tried to help and failed. Laura's expression sharpened. Tried to help how? I don't know yet. But that little girl is very sick, Laura. This isn't something that happened overnight. Laura surveyed the scene. She crouched down and examined the cardboard, the empty bottles, the carefully arranged belongings. Then she stood and looked around at the busy corridor, at the commuters flowing past, at the shops lining the walls, at the constant stream of humanity. This is one of the most trafficked areas in the city, Laura said quietly. Thousands of people pass through here every day. I know. And nobody stopped? Daniel felt the weight of that question settle in his chest. Laura began interviewing people nearby, a newspaper vendor, a coffee shop worker, commuters who use this route daily. The answers came quickly, and they were all variations of the same story. An elderly man stepped forward first. I saw them, several times this week actually. I walk through here every morning on my way to the clinic. Did you speak to them? Laura asked. The man looked down, uncomfortable. No, I thought their parents were probably nearby. Maybe using the restroom or getting food. I didn't want to intrude. A woman in her 30s spoke next. I saw them yesterday, and the day before. The older girl was always sitting so still, and the little one was leaning against her. It looked odd. But there are always people around here. I figured someone was watching them. A commuter in a business suit. I pass through here twice a day. I noticed the girls a few times. But honestly, I was in a hurry. I assumed if something was really wrong, someone would have called the police by now. One by one, people came forward with their confessions. I saw them. I wondered if they were okay. I thought someone else was handling it. Laura listened to each statement without judgment, but something was building inside her. Not anger exactly, but a deep, uncomfortable recognition, because she understood. She understood how easy it was to see something wrong and assume someone else, anyone else, would take care of it. Her phone rang. It was Margaret Hayes from Child Services. Laura, I'm at the hospital with Emily. You need to hear this. What did you find? Lily's condition is critical. Severe malnutrition, untreated infection, acute kidney stress causing the fluid retention. The doctors say she's been sick for months. Laura closed her eyes briefly. Months. Yes. And Laura, Emily has been caring for her alone. The father has been gone for at least 3 days, possibly longer. Do we have an ID on him? David Bennett, 38. Wife died 10 months ago. Lost his job 7 months ago. After that, they disappeared from every system. Laura hung up and turned back to the corridor. She looked at the worn cardboard, at the marks on the wall where the girls had leaned, at the small space they'd occupied while the world rushed past. Detective Martinez approached with his notepad. I've interviewed 23 people so far. 18 of them recognized the girls from photos. Most saw them multiple times over the past 2 weeks. And how many stopped to help? Martinez looked at his notes, then back at Laura. None. Laura felt something heavy settle in her chest. None. They all said the same thing. They assumed the parents were nearby, that someone else had probably already helped, that it wasn't their place to get involved. Laura walked over to the coffee shop and spoke with the owner, a middle-aged woman named Rosa. Did you see those girls? Laura asked, showing her photos of Emily and Lily. Rosa's face went pale. Yes. The older one came in 3 days ago and bought a bottle of water. She counted out exact change, all in coins. She was so polite, so careful, and you didn't think that was unusual. I thought maybe her parents sent her to get water while they waited outside. She seemed responsible, mature. Rose's eyes filled with tears. I should have asked. I should have looked outside to see where she was going, but we were busy and I just went back to work. Did you see where she went? Back to that spot against the wall. To the younger girl. Rosa covered her mouth. Oh my God. They were right there. Every day. And I just kept serving customers. Laura interviewed more people throughout the afternoon. Each story was the same. People had seen, had noticed, had wondered. But they'd all kept moving because surely, someone else was taking care of it. By evening, someone had placed flowers near where the girls had been sitting. Then more flowers appeared. A small memorial was forming, not for lives lost, but for something else, for chances missed, for the weight of collective inaction. Daniel Rivera stood at the edge of the scene, watching people place candles and stuffed animals. A young mother approached the memorial, tears in her eyes. She placed a teddy bear down and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I saw you." And I kept walking. They were right here, Daniel thought, in one of the busiest places in the city, and we all just kept walking, until it was almost too late. By the next morning, the story had spread across the city. Sisters found in underground corridor, father missing, after youngest falls critically. Ill City asks, how did no one notice? The underground corridor beneath Fifth Avenue became a focal point. News crews set up cameras. Reporters interviewed passers-by. The memorial continued to grow. Flowers, candles, handwritten notes. Detective Laura Brennan stood at the scene, coordinating with her team. She'd requested footage from every security camera in the corridor, and what she'd found was damning. The recordings showed Emily and Lily sitting in that exact spot for at least 2 weeks. Day after day, thousands of people walked past them. Some glanced, some paused for a second, but everyone kept moving. Laura called a press conference that afternoon. Reporters crowded forward with microphones and cameras. Detective Brennan, can you confirm that these children were living in the corridor for an extended period? Yes. Based on security footage and witness statements, Emily and Lily Bennett were in that location for approximately 2 weeks. And no one reported them? Laura chose her words carefully. Multiple people saw them. Multiple people noticed something seemed unusual, but no one stopped to ask if they needed help. Why not? That, Laura said quietly, is the question we're all asking ourselves. Another reporter. Is the father considered dangerous? We're actively searching for David Bennett. At this time, we have no evidence of violent intent, but we need to locate him to understand what happened to this family. Back at the corridor, Officer Daniel Rivera was conducting more interviews. An elderly woman approached him, leaning on her cane. "Officer, I need to tell you something." Daniel turned. "Yes, ma'am. I walk through here every Tuesday and Thursday, on my way to physical therapy." Her voice trembled. "I saw those girls. Not once. Not twice. At least 4 times over the past 2 weeks. Did you speak to them?" The woman shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No. The older one always sat so still. The little one was always sleeping or resting. I thought they were just waiting for someone. There are always people around. I assumed someone was watching them. Did you ever see any adults with them?" "No. Now that I think about it, no. They were always alone." She looked at Daniel with devastated eyes. "Why didn't I stop? Why didn't I just ask if they were okay?" Daniel didn't have an answer for her, because it was the same question everyone was asking. A man in his 40s approached next. "I work in the building above. I come through this corridor twice a day, morning and evening. Did you see Emily and Lily?" "Yes, multiple times. He paused, clearly ashamed. "I even left a bottle of water near them one morning. The little one looked so thirsty." Laura, overhearing this, stepped forward. "You left water for them?" The man nodded. "I bought it from the coffee shop and set it down near them, and then I went to work." "You didn't ask if they needed help?" "I was running late, and I thought if they really needed help, someone would have already done something. Security guards walk through here, police patrol regularly, shop owners are always around." He looked at the memorial. "I thought leaving water was enough." Laura studied him. This man had been close enough to help, had noticed enough to bring water. but had stopped short of actually intervening. "What's your name, sir?" Michael Chen." "Mr. Chen, why do you think you didn't do more?" Michael was quiet for a long moment. "Because helping meant getting involved. It meant asking hard questions. It meant taking responsibility." He looked at Laura directly, and it was easier to assume someone else had already done that. Laura wrote this down, because Michael had just articulated what dozens of others were thinking but couldn't say. Throughout the day, more people came forward. A store clerk. I saw them every day during my shift. I thought about telling my manager, but I figured security had already noticed. A train operator. I passed through that corridor during breaks, saw the girls sitting there, assumed their parents were shopping nearby. A nurse on her way to work. I noticed the little one looked sick, but I was already late for my shift. I told myself I'd call someone if they were still there when I came back through, but when I returned 8 hours later, I forgot. Each confession carried the same weight. I saw. I wondered. I assumed someone else would act. By evening, the memorial had grown significantly, but alongside the flowers and candles, people began leaving something else. Handwritten apologies. "I saw you. I'm sorry I didn't stop. I walked past you 3 times. I should have asked if you were okay. I thought someone else was watching. I was wrong." Officer Rivera stood reading these notes, feeling the collective guilt washing over the city. His partner, Officer Chen, approached. "This is hitting people hard." "It should," Daniel said, "because every single person who walked past those girls had a chance to change what happened, and none of them took it. So what do we do now?" Daniel looked at the memorial, at the faces of people stopping to pay their respects to children who were still alive. "Barely. We make sure it doesn't happen again," he said quietly, "and we find their father before it's too late to understand why this family fell apart. Because the answer to who did this wasn't simple. It was everyone who saw and kept walking. 1 year earlier, the Bennett apartment was small but filled with warmth. 2 bedrooms in a modest building on the east side of the city. Photos covered the walls. Birthday parties, holidays, ordinary moments made precious by memory. It was a Saturday morning. The smell of pancakes filled the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Rebecca Bennett stood at the stove, her red hair the same vibrant shade as her daughter's, tied back in a loose bun. She moved with practiced efficiency, flipping pancakes while simultaneously checking Emily's homework folder and making sure Lily's sippy cup was within reach. Emily sat at the small table coloring. Lily was in her high chair, banging a spoon rhythmically against the tray. "Almost ready," Rebecca said, sliding pancakes onto plates. "Emily, can you get the syrup from the cabinet?" Emily jumped up. "Can I have extra?" "Just a little extra." Rebecca smiled. David walked in from the bedroom, pulling on his jacket for his weekend shift. He looked different then, present, engaged, lighter somehow. He kissed Rebecca on the cheek. "Smells amazing. Sit, eat. You've got 15 minutes before you need to leave." David sat next to Emily and gently tapped Lily's hand. "How's my little drummer?" Lily giggled, banging her spoon with renewed enthusiasm. For that moment, everything was perfectly ordinary. Safe, whole. Rebecca was the map of their family. She knew things no one else did. She knew exactly when Lily would wake up at night. She knew which pharmacy had their insurance on file. She knew Emily's teacher's name, the best route to avoid traffic, how to stretch $40 into a week's worth of groceries. She held all the invisible knowledge that kept their family functioning. And when she got sick, that knowledge began to disappear with her. It started with persistent fatigue. "I'm just tired," Rebecca insisted when David suggested she see a doctor. "Working too much, I'll rest this weekend." But the fatigue didn't go away. Then came the cough, then the weight loss. 3 months later, Rebecca collapsed at work. The hospital kept her for tests, then more tests, then a diagnosis that changed everything. David tried to hold things together. He worked. He visited Rebecca every evening. He took care of Emily and Lily as best he could, but he didn't know where Rebecca kept the spare house keys, which bills were due when, or that Lily needed her medication taken with food. The medical bills started arriving. Even with insurance, the costs were staggering. David began missing work to stay at the hospital. His employer was understanding at first, then less so. "David, I need reliability. If you can't commit to your schedule, I'll be there, I promise." But promises were becoming impossible to keep. When Rebecca died 4 months later, something fundamental broke inside David. He didn't cry at the funeral. He didn't speak. He just sat, staring at nothing, while Emily held his hand and Lily asked over and over, "Where's Mama?" After the funeral, David sat alone in the dark apartment. Rebecca's coffee mug still sat on the counter. Her reading glasses were on the nightstand. Her sweater hung on the back of the chair. Everything was exactly as she'd left it, except she wasn't coming back. David stared at the pile of unopened bills on the kitchen table, at the eviction notice he'd been ignoring for weeks, at the phone that kept ringing with calls from creditors, from his former employer, from people asking for things he couldn't give, and he felt himself slipping, not all at once, but slowly, like sand through fingers. Emily learned quickly. She started making sandwiches for Lily. She turned on cartoons to keep her quiet. She stopped asking Daddy for things because he didn't seem to hear anymore. She was 9 years old, but she was learning to think like an adult. 3 months after Rebecca died, the eviction became final. David sat on the floor of the empty apartment, surrounded by boxes he couldn't remember packing. "We'll figure it out," he whispered to Emily, his voice hollow. "We'll find somewhere else." But there was nowhere else. No family nearby. Rebecca's parents were gone, and David's family was across the country. No savings. Everything had gone to medical bills. No job. He'd been let go weeks ago. Rebecca had known how to ask for help. She'd known which agencies to call, which neighbors to lean on, which resources existed. But Rebecca was gone, and David was drowning in a world he no longer understood. The scene fades. David sitting alone in the dark, Rebecca's belongings still scattered around him, the invisible map of their family lost forever, and Emily watching from the doorway, beginning to understand that from now on, she would have to be the one who remembered, who organized, who held everything together, because no one else could anymore. 5 months after Rebecca's death, David sat in his car in a parking lot, staring at the final eviction notice. His hands trembled as he held the paper. "You have 48 hours to vacate the premises." In the back seat, Emily had created a small space for herself and Lily using blankets and pillows. Lily was asleep, her thumb in her mouth. Emily was awake, watching her father with eyes that had learned to read his silences. "Daddy, are we going somewhere?" David didn't answer immediately. His mind felt like fog, thick, directionless, suffocating. "Not yet, sweetheart, but we need to eat." David looked at the crumpled bills in the cup holder. $3. That was all that remained. "Tomorrow," he said quietly. But tomorrow kept slipping away. When the final eviction happened, David didn't resist. He simply gathered what little they had. 2 bags of clothes, Lily's stuffed rabbit, a few photos of Rebecca. They tried a shelter first, but the rules were strict. No staying during daytime hours, 2-week maximum, check-in by 6 p.m., or lose your bed. David tried to follow the rules. But some days, time simply disappeared. He'd sit on a bench somewhere, staring at nothing, and hours would pass without him noticing. Emily became the one who watched the clock, who reminded him when they needed to leave, who kept Lily quiet and occupied. She was 10 years old, but she'd stopped being a child. One evening, they arrived at the shelter 20 minutes late. The coordinator shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett. Your beds have been given to another family. Rules are rules." David stood there holding Lily, Emily beside him. He wanted to argue, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. They walked through the city until Emily spotted the underground corridor beneath 5th Avenue. It was sheltered, relatively clean, constantly populated, which felt safer somehow. David found a spot against the far wall, away from the main flow of foot traffic. "We'll stay here tonight," he told the girls, "just until I figure something out." But one night became 2, then 3, then 2 weeks. Emily did what she could. She found water fountains in nearby buildings. She bought crackers and bread with coins she found on the ground. She kept Lily as comfortable as possible on their piece of cardboard. She never complained, never cried where anyone could see. Then Lily got sick. It started with a fever. Then she stopped eating. Her face began to swell, just slightly at first, then more noticeably. Her stomach became distended, bloated. Emily begged her father. "Daddy, something's wrong with Lily. She needs a doctor." David's eyes were wild, unfocused. "We can't afford a doctor. And if we go to a hospital, they'll ask questions. They'll take you both away from me. But she's really sick. I'll fix it, David said desperately. I can fix it. He pulled out his phone, battery nearly dead, and searched frantically. Home remedies for swelling. Natural cures for kidney problems. What to do when you can't afford medical care. He found websites that promised solutions. Simple, natural, affordable. Written by people who sounded confident, authoritative. David used his last few dollars to buy herbs, vinegar, and other ingredients from a corner store. He mixed them following instructions from a website he barely understood, not noticing the tiny disclaimer, not a substitute for professional medical advice. "Lily, baby, you need to drink this," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "It'll make the swelling go down." Lily took a sip and immediately started crying. It burned. I know, just a little more," David's voice cracked. "Please." But Lily refused, turning her face away. Over the next 2 days, Lily got worse. The swelling increased. She stopped responding, just lay on the cardboard, barely conscious. David sat against the wall, staring at his daughter, watching her fade. "I'm killing her. I've already lost Rebecca. Now I'm losing Lily too. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this." And then, on the third morning, something inside David broke completely. His mind simply shut down, a final escape from unbearable reality. He stood up slowly, looked at Emily and Lily, his daughters, his responsibility, his failure. I need to go find help," he said, his voice distant, disconnected. "Stay here. I'll come back." And then he walked away. Not with a plan, not with intention. His body just moved while his mind went somewhere else entirely. Emily woke up an hour later. "Daddy?" She looked around. He wasn't there. "Daddy!" She called louder, but he was gone, and Emily was alone with her dying sister in a corridor where thousands of people would walk past that day, not one of them knowing, not one of them stopping. 3 days after David disappeared, Emily sat in a quiet room at Metro General Hospital. The walls were painted a calming green. There was a box of tissues on the table she hadn't touched. A woman sat across from her, Margaret Hayes, a social worker with gentle eyes and 20 years of experience. "Emily," Margaret said softly, "I know you've answered a lot of questions already, but I need to understand what happened so we can help you and Lily. Is that okay?" Emily nodded. She sat perfectly straight in her chair, back not touching the cushion, hands folded precisely in her lap. Margaret noticed immediately. "You know, you can relax here. You can sit however feels comfortable." Emily didn't move. "I'm okay like this." Margaret didn't push. She'd seen this before. Children who'd learned that being still, being polite, being perfect was the only way to survive. "Can you tell me about when Lily got sick? When did you first notice something was wrong?" Emily's voice was quiet, measured, every word chosen with deliberate care. Her face started getting puffy, and her stomach. "It happened slowly over a few weeks." "Did your dad notice?" "Yes, he got really worried. He said she needed medicine, but we didn't have money for a doctor." "So what did he do?" "He looked things up on his phone. He found something online that was supposed to help with swelling." Emily paused. "He mixed things together, herbs and vinegar and other stuff. He said it would make her better." Margaret wrote carefully, keeping her expression neutral. "And what happened when Lily drank it?" "She cried. She said it hurt." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Dad tried to get her to drink more, but she wouldn't. And then she got worse. The swelling got worse. She stopped eating. She just laid there." "And then your dad left?" Emily nodded slowly. "He kept saying, 'I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.' He looked so scared, so lost. And then one morning he stood up and said he needed to go find help, that we should wait there, that he'd come back." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But he didn't come back." Margaret leaned forward slightly. "Emily, when Officer Rivera found you this morning, you said something to him. Do you remember what you said?" Emily looked down at her hands. "I said my dad tried to help and failed." "Why did you choose those exact words?" Emily was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Because that's what happened. He tried. He really, really tried. But he didn't know how to make it better. And I didn't know how to explain all of that in a way that wouldn't sound wrong." Margaret felt her chest tighten. "Wrong how? Like he was a bad person. Like he hurt us on purpose. Emily looked up, her eyes desperate. He wasn't trying to hurt Lily, he was trying to save her. He just didn't know how. Did you practice what you would say if someone stopped to help? Emily looked surprised. How did you know? Because you spoke very carefully, like you'd thought about it a lot. I did think about it, Emily admitted. Every time someone walked past us, I thought, maybe this time they'll stop. And if they do, what do I say? How do I explain without making things worse? She wiped her eyes. I didn't want people to think Daddy was bad, but I also needed someone to help Lily. Margaret had to take a moment. This 10-year-old had been rehearsing how to ask for help, weighing every word, trying to protect her father while also saving her sister. Emily, why didn't you just tell someone your sister was sick and you needed help? Because I was scared, Emily said simply. Scared they'd take us away from Daddy. Scared they'd be angry at him. Scared they'd think we were bad kids or something. She looked at Margaret. So I practiced being calm, being polite, choosing words that wouldn't make people scared or angry. There was a knock on the door. Officer Daniel Rivera stepped in. Margaret, can I speak with you? Margaret excused herself and stepped into the hallway. We located David Bennett, Daniel said quietly. He was found at a bus station 90 miles north. He's disoriented, barely coherent. Paramedics are bringing him in for evaluation. Is he dangerous? No, he's broken. Daniel looked back through the window at Emily. That little girl is still trying to protect him. Even now. Margaret nodded. Daniel, when Emily said those words to you, my dad tried to help and failed. She wasn't making an accusation. She was trying to explain something impossibly complicated in the simplest way she could. Daniel was quiet, absorbing this. She's been choosing her words carefully for months, Margaret continued, training herself to be calm, to be strong, to say exactly the right thing so adults wouldn't get upset or scared. A 10-year-old shouldn't have to do that. Daniel looked at Emily through the window, sitting perfectly straight, hands folded, still trying so hard to be good. No, he agreed quietly. She shouldn't. Inside the room, a nurse brought Emily a juice box and crackers. Emily took them with a quiet, thank you, then set them aside, untouched. Even here, even safe, she was still being careful, still being good, still choosing every action with too much care. Detective Laura Brennan sat at her desk reviewing the timeline she'd constructed over the past 2 days. What she'd found was both devastating and infuriating. David Bennett, 38 years old. Wife Rebecca died 10 months ago. Lost his job 7 months ago. Evicted 5 months ago. After that, nothing. The family had vanished from every system. Laura picked up her phone and called Lincoln Elementary School. This is Detective Brennan with Metro PD. I need information on a student named Emily Bennett, age 10. Typing sounds. Yes, I have her record here, but she hasn't attended since 4 months ago. And did anyone follow up on that absence? A report was filed with the district office. Standard procedure. What happened with the report? More typing. Silence. It looks like it was logged, but there's no record of follow-up action. No home visit, no phone calls. Laura felt anger rising. So a 10-year-old disappeared from school 4 months ago and no one checked? I'm sorry, Detective. It appears it fell through the cracks. Laura hung up and turned to Officer Martinez, who'd been interviewing witnesses all morning. What did you find? Martinez opened his notepad. I've interviewed 62 people who regularly use the Fifth Avenue corridor. 41 of them recognized Emily and Lily from the photos. And how many stopped to help? 1 person left water. Everyone else kept walking. Laura stood and walked to the window. 1 person left water and walked away. 40 others saw them and did nothing. Martinez nodded. Most gave the same explanation. They assumed the parents were nearby, that someone else had already helped, that it wasn't their place to interfere. Laura's phone rang. It was Dr. Chen from Metro General. Detective, I've completed Lily Bennett's full medical evaluation. What did you find? Severe chronic malnutrition, untreated bacterial infection that's been progressing for months, acute kidney failure causing the fluid retention. That's why she was so swollen. Laura closed her eyes. And the substance her father gave her. It made things worse, certainly. It was a dangerous mixture that caused irritation and chemical stress. But Detective, Dr. Chen paused. That's not what nearly killed her. What do you mean? Lily has been systematically neglected for months. The malnutrition, the infection, the kidney problems, these didn't develop overnight. This child was dying slowly, in full public view, while thousands of people walked past her every single day. Laura felt the weight of those words. How long has she been this sick? Based on her lab results and physical examination, I'd estimate 3 to 4 months of progressive decline. 3 to 4 months, Laura repeated, while they were living in that corridor. Exactly. Dr. Chen's voice was firm. I'm documenting this clearly in my report. Her body was failing while the world walked past. After hanging up, Laura called Officer Daniel Rivera. Daniel, I need you to find Michael Chen, the man who left water for the girls. Already located him. He works in the building above the corridor. IT department. He's agreed to come in. An hour later, Michael Chen sat across from Laura in an interview room. He looked exhausted, guilt etched into every line of his face. Mr. Chen, tell me about the morning you left water for the girls. Michael's voice was quiet. It was about a week ago. I was running late for work. I saw them sitting there. I'd seen them before multiple times. But that morning, the little one looked really thirsty. Her lips were dry. So I stopped at the coffee shop, bought a bottle of water, and left it near them. Did you speak to them? No, I was already late, and I thought bringing water was enough. But you didn't ask if they needed more help. Michael looked down. No, because asking meant getting involved. It meant taking responsibility. And I was late, and there were security guards who walk through that corridor, and police officers who patrol regularly, and shop owners who are always around. He looked up at Laura. I thought someone else, someone whose job it actually was, would handle it. Laura studied him. Mr. Chen, you were close enough to help. You noticed enough to bring water. Why do you think you stopped there? Michael was quiet for a long moment. Because it was easier. Bringing water let me feel like I'd done something good without actually having to confront what was really happening, without having to ask hard questions or make difficult calls. His voice cracked. I walked away because it was comfortable, and now that little girl almost died. Laura wrote this down, because Michael had just articulated what dozens of others were thinking but couldn't say out loud. The uncomfortable truth, that compassion without action is just performance. That noticing without helping is sometimes worse than not noticing at all. After Michael left, Laura stood alone in the interview room. She thought about the 41 people who'd seen Emily and Lily, the commuters, the shop workers, the retirees heading to medical appointments, good people, normal people, people who saw something wrong and convinced themselves that someone else, anyone else, would fix it. The question isn't who did this, Laura realized. It's who didn't do anything when they could have. And that answer was far more uncomfortable than anyone wanted to admit. The story broke on every major news outlet by morning. Father found after daughters discovered in underground corridor. Youngest daughter critical. Months of illness went unnoticed. Community asks, where were we? David Bennett was brought back to the city under medical supervision. He wasn't arrested, not yet. Instead, he was placed in a psychiatric evaluation unit at Metro General, the same hospital where Lily was fighting for her life 3 floors above him. Detective Laura Brennan stood outside his room, watching through the observation window. David sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. His hair was uncombed. His clothes hung loose on his frame. He looked like a man who'd been hollowed out from the inside. Dr. Sarah Winters, the psychiatric consultant, approached Laura. He's been like that since they brought him in. Barely speaking, won't make eye contact. Classic presentation of severe depression with dissociative features. Is he dangerous? To himself, possibly. To others? No. This man isn't violent, detective. He's broken. Laura entered the room slowly. David didn't look up. Mr. Bennett, I'm Detective Laura Brennan. I need to ask you some questions about Emily and Lily. David's shoulders tensed, but he didn't respond. Your daughters were found in the 5th Avenue underground corridor 3 days ago. Lily is in critical condition. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Finally, David spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Is she alive? Yes, barely. The doctors are doing everything they can. David closed his eyes. A single tear ran down his face. Laura pulled up a chair. David, I need to understand what happened. Help me understand. I don't know what happened, David said hollowly. One day we had a home. Rebecca was alive. Everything worked. And then everything stopped working, and I didn't know how to fix it. Tell me about when Lily got sick. David's hands started shaking. She was swelling. Her face, her stomach. She was in pain. And I didn't have money for a doctor. I didn't have insurance anymore. His voice broke. I thought I could help her myself. I found something online, natural remedies. People said they worked. What did you give her? I don't even remember exactly. Herbs, vinegar, things the website said would reduce swelling. David looked up for the first time, his eyes desperate. I was trying to help her. I wasn't trying to hurt her. But when it didn't work, why didn't you take her to a hospital? Because I was scared. David's voice rose, then immediately dropped again. Scared they'd take my girls away. Scared they'd say I was a bad father. Scared of questions I couldn't answer. He put his head in his hands. And then I just couldn't think anymore. My brain just stopped. Is that why you left? David nodded slowly. I woke up that morning and looked at Lily, and I knew she was dying. And I knew it was my fault, and I couldn't be there anymore. I couldn't watch her die because I failed. So you walked away. I don't even remember deciding to leave. I just started walking, and I kept walking. Like if I walked far enough, maybe I could escape what I'd done. Laura watched him carefully. This wasn't a monster. This was a man who'd lost everything. His wife, his job, his home, his ability to function, and had collapsed under the weight. But his daughters had paid the price. Meanwhile, across the city, public opinion was sharply divided. Online forums exploded with debates. He abandoned his children while one was dying. Lock him up. His wife died. He lost his job. He had no support. Where was the community? Mental illness isn't an excuse for neglect. No one helped him. No one stopped. We all failed this family. The arguments grew heated. Everyone wanted a simple answer. A single person to blame. But the truth was far more complicated than anyone wanted to admit. At Child Services, Emily and Lily were officially placed in temporary emergency foster care. Emily sat in Margaret Hayes' office, her small suitcase packed beside her. Emily, you're going to stay with a very nice family for a little while, just until we figure everything out. Is that okay? Emily nodded, but her eyes were distant. Can I see my dad? Margaret hesitated. Not right now, sweetheart, but maybe soon. Is he in trouble? It's complicated, but people are trying to help him just like they're helping you and Lily. People are mad at him, Emily said quietly. I saw it on TV in the waiting room. People saying he's bad. Margaret knelt down to Emily's level. Some people are angry, yes, but some people understand that your dad was very sick too, just in a different way than Lily. He tried, Emily whispered. He really tried. I know, honey. I know he did. But as Margaret watched Emily leave with her temporary foster family, she couldn't shake one thought. This child was still protecting her father, still defending him, still carrying a burden no 10-year-old should ever have to carry. That evening, Laura Brennan organized a community meeting at the police station. Over 200 people showed up. Commuters, shop owners, residents, social workers. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Laura stood at the front. Thank you all for coming. We're here tonight because 2 children were found living in one of our busiest public spaces for weeks, and no one intervened until it was almost too late. We need to talk about why that happened. A woman in her 50s raised her hand. I saw those girls. Multiple times. And I feel terrible, but what was I supposed to do? Call the police every time I see children sitting somewhere? That's a fair question, Laura acknowledged. And I don't have a perfect answer. But I do have one question for all of you. How many people in this room saw Emily and Lily at some point? Slowly, hesitantly, hands began to rise. Dozens of them. And how many of you stopped to ask if they needed help? Every hand went down except one. Michael Chen, who'd brought water. The silence in the room was crushing. Laura continued, I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here because we need to understand what happened, not just to David Bennett, but to all of us, to our community, to our collective responsibility. A man stood. But there are security guards, police patrols, social services. Isn't it their job? And when everyone assumes it's someone else's job, Laura said quietly, whose job is it really? No one had an answer. The meeting ended with more questions than solutions. But something had shifted. People were starting to see themselves in the story, not as heroes or villains, but as participants in a collective failure. Because the uncomfortable truth was this. Every person who walked past Emily and Lily had made a choice, and those choices, added together, had nearly cost a little girl her life. Dr. Robert Pemberton had been a pediatrician for 32 years. He'd seen neglect before. He'd seen poverty, illness, and families struggling at the edge of survival. But Lily Bennett's case was different in a way that haunted him. He stood in the pediatric ICU, reviewing her chart one more time. The numbers told a story that was both clinical and devastating. Severe protein-calorie malnutrition, untreated bacterial infection, kidney urinary tract, acute kidney injury with fluid overload, electrolyte imbalances, moderate anemia. Dr. Pemberton pulled up her imaging results. The infection had been progressing for months. Visible scarring on her kidneys indicated repeated, untreated episodes. He sat down and began writing his official medical report. But halfway through, he stopped and added something he rarely included in clinical documentation. This child's condition did not develop suddenly. The malnutrition, infection, and resulting kidney failure represent months of progressive decline. Lily Bennett was dying slowly, visibly in a public space where thousands of people saw her daily. He paused, then continued. The question is not only what happened to this child, but why no intervention occurred until her body was in critical failure. Later that morning, Dr. Pemberton met with Detective Brennan and Margaret Hayes in a conference room. I wanted to walk you through Lily's timeline, he said, pulling up medical images on the screen, because understanding when this started is crucial. He displayed a series of photos taken when Lily was admitted, the severe swelling in her face, abdomen, and extremities. This is called edema, fluid retention caused by kidney failure. But kidneys don't fail overnight, especially in a 3-year-old. Margaret leaned forward. How long would this have taken to develop? Based on her lab work and the degree of kidney scarring, I estimate she's had untreated urinary tract infections for at least 3 to 4 months. Each infection damaged her kidneys a little more. The malnutrition made it harder for her body to fight back. Eventually, her kidneys couldn't filter fluids properly anymore, causing the swelling. Laura asked, what about the mixture her father gave her? How much did that contribute? It made things worse, certainly. The combination of vinegar and herbs likely caused chemical irritation and increased stress on already failing kidneys. But Dr. Pemberton's voice was firm. That mixture didn't cause this. It was a symptom of a much larger problem. Explain. David Bennett was attempting amateur medicine because he had no access to real medical care. But even without that mixture, Lily was already dying. The malnutrition alone would have been life-threatening. The infection alone would have been serious. Combined with no treatment, he shook his head. She wouldn't have survived much longer regardless. Margaret asked quietly, so what would have saved her? Simple intervention. At any point in those 3 to 4 months, if someone had noticed she was sick and brought her to any emergency room, this would have been caught early. A basic exam, some antibiotics, proper nutrition, Lily would have recovered fully. That simple? That simple. Dr. Pemberton looked at both of them. This wasn't some rare disease requiring expensive specialists. This was treatable, preventable illness that became life-threatening because no one intervened. He pulled up another document. Emergency room visit records. I also checked our system. In the 3 months before Lily was found, our ER treated 17 children from that same general area for minor issues. Cuts, fevers, stomach problems. All of them walked in or were brought in by concerned adults who noticed something wrong. What's your point? Laura asked. My point is that people do stop. People do help. When a child appears sick or hurt, most people's instinct is to intervene. He closed the laptop. Which makes this case even more troubling. Why didn't anyone stop for Lily? Margaret had a theory. Because she wasn't visibly injured. No blood, no broken bones. And she was always with her sister, who seemed calm and in control. People saw what looked like 2 tired children resting, not a medical emergency in progress. Dr. Pemberton nodded. That's the invisible nature of neglect. Abuse often has visible markers, bruises, burns, obvious fear. But neglect is quiet. It's a child getting thinner week by week, skin getting paler, energy fading, and if no one is paying close attention, it's easy to miss until it's nearly too late. He turned back to Lily's chart. The human body is remarkably resilient, especially in children. Lily's body kept fighting, kept trying to survive, even as it slowly failed. But it was sending signals. The swelling, the lethargy, the visible illness. And for months, those signals went unanswered. Laura stood and walked to the window. So you're saying this was entirely preventable? Entirely, Dr. Pemberton confirmed. At any point, a simple question, is that child okay? Could have changed everything. That afternoon, Dr. Pemberton visited Lily in the ICU. She was awake now, though still weak. The swelling had reduced significantly with dialysis and antibiotics. An IV dripped steadily into her small arm. "Hello, Lily," he said gently, sitting beside her bed. Lily looked at him with wide, tired eyes. She didn't speak. "You're doing much better. Your body is healing." Still no response. A nurse approached quietly. "She hasn't spoken since she woke up, doctor. We're monitoring, but physically there's no reason she can't talk." Dr. Pemberton understood. Sometimes trauma manifested not in broken bones, but in broken voices. He gently adjusted her blanket. "That's okay, Lily. You don't have to talk until you're ready. We'll be right here taking care of you." As he left the ICU, Dr. Pemberton thought about his report, about the cold, clinical language required for medical documentation. But the truth was far simpler and far more heartbreaking. A 3-year-old child had been dying in plain sight while the world walked past. Not because people were cruel, but because no one stopped long enough to really see. David Bennett sat in the psychiatric evaluation room, staring at a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. Dr. Sarah Winters sat across from him, patient and calm. "David, can you tell me what you were thinking the morning you left the girls?" David's voice was barely audible. "I wasn't thinking, that's the problem. I couldn't think anymore." "What do you mean?" "After Rebecca died, it was like someone turned off the lights in my brain. Everything that used to make sense just stopped." He looked up, eyes hollow. "She knew everything, where the bills were, when appointments were, how to stretch $20 into meals for a week. I didn't even know we had health insurance until I found the card in her wallet after she was gone." Dr. Winters nodded. "You lost more than your wife. You lost your map." "Yes." David's hands trembled. "I tried. I really tried. I went to work, took care of the girls, paid what I could, but I kept missing things, important things. And then I'd get angry at myself for missing them, which made it harder to think, which made me miss more things." His voice cracked. It was like drowning in slow motion. "What about when Lily got sick?" David closed his eyes. "I knew she needed a doctor, but I didn't have money. I didn't have insurance anymore. And I was so scared that if I took her to the hospital, they'd ask questions. They'd see we were homeless. They'd take my girls away." He looked at Dr. Winters desperately. "So I tried to fix it myself. I found websites that said natural remedies could help. I thought if I just tried hard enough, I could make her better without losing them. But it didn't work. No, she got worse. And I kept trying different things, kept hoping tomorrow she'd be better, but she just kept getting worse." David put his head in his hands. "And then one morning, I looked at her lying there, barely breathing, and I knew she was dying. I knew it was my fault. And I couldn't be there anymore. I couldn't watch what I'd done. So you left. I didn't plan to leave. I just started walking, like my body was on autopilot. I walked to the bus station, got on a bus going anywhere, sat in the back and stared out the window." He wiped his eyes. "I wasn't trying to abandon them. I was trying to escape myself, because I couldn't live with what I'd become." Dr. Winters made notes. "David, has anyone ever evaluated you for depression? Rebecca used to say I should talk to someone after my mom died, but I never did. Didn't think I needed it. What about after Rebecca died?" David shook his head. "I was too busy trying to keep everything from falling apart. And then when it did fall apart, I was too gone." Dr. Winters looked at him with professional compassion. "David, you're suffering from severe clinical depression, likely with dissociative features. This isn't an excuse for what happened to your daughters, but it is an explanation." "I don't want an explanation," David whispered. "I want my daughters back. I want Rebecca back. I want to go back to when everything made sense." "I know, but we can't go back. We can only move forward." David looked at her with desperate eyes. "How? How do I move forward knowing I almost killed my own daughter?" Dr. Winters didn't have an easy answer, because there wasn't one. Detective Brennan, who'd been observing through the window, turned to her partner. "He's not a monster." "No, Martinez agreed. He's just a man who broke, and kept breaking, until there was nothing left. Laura thought about the public outcry, the demands for justice, the anger directed at David Bennett, and she realized everyone wanted a villain, someone to blame, someone to punish. But sometimes there were no villains, just broken people, failing systems, and a community that looked away. Emily sat in Dr. Sarah Winter's office 3 days later. Unlike David's evaluation room, this space was designed for children. Soft chairs, colorful paintings, a small table with art supplies. But Emily sat rigid in her chair, hands folded back straight. Just like always, Dr. Winters had seen this before. Children who'd learned that being perfectly still, perfectly polite, was the only way to survive. Emily, you don't have to sit like that here. You can move around, you can draw if you'd like, this is a safe space. Emily glanced at the art supplies but didn't move. I'm okay. Dr. Winters tried a different approach. Can you tell me about a normal day before your mom got sick? Emily's expression softened slightly. Mom would make breakfast. She always made sure Lily ate first because Lily was picky. Then she'd help me with my backpack and walk me to the bus stop. After school, we'd do homework together, and she'd let me help make dinner. A small smile. She said I was her best helper. That sounds nice. It was. Everything worked when Mom was there. What changed after she died? Emily's smile faded. Dad tried. He really did. But he'd forget things. Like he'd forget Lily needed her medicine with food, or that I had a school project due. He'd sit at the kitchen table staring at bills, and I'd have to remind him we needed dinner. She paused. So I started doing things myself, making sandwiches, keeping track of things, trying to help. Dr. Winters leaned forward gently. Emily, how old were you when you started doing those things? 9, almost 10. That's a lot of responsibility for someone so young. Emily shrugged. Someone had to do it. But it shouldn't have been you. Emily looked confused. Why not? I was there. I could help. Dr. Winters chose her words carefully. Because children are supposed to be protected, Emily. Not doing the protecting. Emily was quiet for a long moment. But if I didn't protect Lily, who would? The question hung in the air, heartbreaking in its simple truth. Dr. Winters asked, when did you start practicing what you'd say if someone stopped to help? Emily looked surprised. How did you know about that? Because when Officer Rivera found you, you spoke very carefully, like you'd thought about it. I did think about it, Emily admitted. Every day people walked past us, I'd think, maybe today someone will stop, and I'd practice in my head what I'd say, how to explain without making Dad sound bad, how to ask for help without sounding like we were broken. Why didn't you want to sound broken? Because broken things get thrown away. Emily's voice was matter-of-fact, as if stating an obvious truth. I thought if I seemed strong and calm and polite, people would want to help us. But if I cried or seemed scared, they might just walk away faster. Dr. Winters felt her chest tighten. This 10-year-old had taught herself to suppress every natural emotional response because she believed her survival depended on appearing strong. Emily, when was the last time you cried? Emily thought hard. At Mom's funeral. But after that, I stopped. Because crying made Dad sadder, and Lily would get scared. So I just stopped. And when you were sitting in that corridor, sick and scared and alone, you didn't cry then either. No, I had to stay calm. For Lily. Emily looked down at her hands. She needed me to be strong. Dr. Winters moved her chair closer. Emily, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You are 10 years old. You should never have had to be that strong. You should never have had to train yourself to hide your feelings or choose your words so carefully. That's not your job. But someone had to. No, Dr. Winters said firmly but gently. Adults should have protected you. Your father should have gotten help. The people who saw you should have stopped. The systems that were supposed to catch you should have worked. But none of that was your responsibility. Emily's carefully constructed composure began to crack. But if I wasn't strong, Lily would have. You saved your sister's life by being brave enough to finally tell someone the truth. But you shouldn't have been in that position in the first place. For the first time since her mother died, Emily's eyes filled with tears. I tried so hard to do everything right. I know, sweetheart. I know you did. And it still wasn't enough. Dr. Winters reached for a tissue box. It was never supposed to be your job to be enough. You were supposed to be a child. You were supposed to be protected. Emily finally broke. The tears came, not quiet, careful tears, but the deep, raw sobs of a child who'd been holding too much for too long. Dr. Winters let her cry, offering presence without pressure. When Emily finally caught her breath, she whispered, "I'm so tired of being strong." "Then you don't have to be anymore," Dr. Winters said softly. "Not here, not with me. You can just be Emily, 10 years old, scared, sad, tired, whatever you're really feeling." Emily looked up with red, swollen eyes. "What if I forget how? How to what? How to just be a kid?" And that, Dr. Winters realized, was the truly devastating question. 3 months had passed since Officer Rivera found Emily and Lily in the underground corridor. Lily was recovering. The swelling had disappeared. Her kidney function was improving. She'd started speaking again, short sentences at first, then gradually more. She was staying in a specialized foster home with medical support. Emily was in a separate placement with a family trained in trauma care. She was attending school again, though she still sat too straight, spoke too carefully, watched everything too closely. David was in a supervised treatment facility, part psychiatric care, part rehabilitation. He wasn't in jail. After extensive evaluation, the district attorney had decided this wasn't a criminal case in the traditional sense. It was something far more complicated, but the community hadn't forgotten. The memorial in the Fifth Avenue corridor had become permanent. People still left flowers. The city had installed a small plaque, "In memory of what we failed to see. May we choose to look more carefully." And now, Judge Patricia Lawson had called for a community hearing. Not a trial, not a sentencing. A public forum to address what had happened and why. The courthouse assembly room was packed. Over 300 people filled the seats. Commuters who'd walked past the girls, shop owners from the corridor, social workers, teachers, medical professionals, police officers, and journalists. Judge Lawson sat at the front, her expression grave but compassionate. "We're here today not to assign criminal blame," she began, "but to understand how 2 children lived in one of our busiest public spaces for weeks while slowly failing, and how our community, all of us, failed to intervene." She looked around the room. "This isn't about shame. It's about responsibility. It's about asking ourselves hard questions so this never happens again." Dr. Pemberton was called to present his medical findings. He stood and spoke clearly. Lily Bennett was dying slowly over the course of months. Her condition was visible to anyone paying attention. The swelling, the lethargy, the obvious illness. At any point, a simple question, "Is that child okay? Does she need help?" would have saved her life. He displayed photos of Lily at admission, swollen, pale, barely conscious. This is what systematic neglect looks like. Not dramatic, not violent, just quiet, progressive failure while the world moves past. Detective Brennan presented her investigation findings. "We interviewed 87 people who regularly used the Fifth Avenue corridor. 63 of them recognized Emily and Lily from photos. Most had seen them multiple times." She paused. "Only one person took any action, and that was leaving a bottle of water before walking away." A murmur went through the crowd. The most common explanation was this: "I assumed someone else was handling it. The security guards, the police, the shop owners, social services, anyone but them." She looked directly at the audience. And that assumption, that collective assumption, nearly killed a 3-year-old child. Margaret Hayes spoke about systemic failures. Emily Bennett stopped attending school 4 months before she was found. A report was filed. It was logged into the system. And then nothing happened. No follow-up, no home visit, no phone calls. Her voice was firm. "The safety net we promised families failed completely." Judge Lawson then asked the question that made everyone shift uncomfortably in their seats. "How many people in this room saw Emily and Lily at some point during those weeks?" Slowly, reluctantly, hands began to rise. Dozens of them. The room fell silent. "And how many of you stopped to offer help?" Michael Chen's hand stayed up. The man who'd left water. Every other hand lowered. The silence was crushing. Judge Lawson let it sit for a moment. "I'm not asking this to shame you. I'm asking because we need to understand the distance between seeing and acting, between noticing and helping." A woman in her 60s stood, tears streaming down her face. "I saw them 4 times. I walked right past. I told myself their parents must be nearby, that someone else would check. I told myself I was late, that it wasn't my place. Her voice broke. I have grandchildren their age, and I just kept walking. Another person stood. I work in the coffee shop. The older girl came in twice to buy water. She was always so polite, counting exact change. I thought she seemed responsible, mature. I never thought to ask why a child was buying water alone. One by one, people stood to confess what they'd seen and what they hadn't done. The confessions weren't angry. They were grief-stricken, because everyone in that room was realizing the same uncomfortable truth. They'd had the power to change this story, and they hadn't used it. Judge Lawson finally spoke again. In a few minutes, I'm going to invite Emily Bennett to speak if she chooses to. But before that, I want us to sit with what we've heard, to really feel the weight of collective responsibility. The room remained silent. Outside, reporters waited. Inside, a community sat with its conscience. And somewhere in that room, Emily sat with her foster mother, preparing to say words she'd been holding for months, words that would change everything. Judge Lawson looked toward the back of the room where Emily sat with her foster mother, Mrs. Chen. Emily Bennett has asked if she could speak today. Emily, would you still like to do that? Emily stood slowly. She wore a simple blue dress her foster mother had bought her. Her red hair was pulled back neatly. She walked to the front of the room with careful, measured steps. Mrs. Chen started to stand to accompany her, but Emily shook her head gently. I can do it alone. The room was absolutely silent as Emily reached the microphone. She was so small she had to stand on a step stool to reach it. For a long moment she just looked out at the crowd, at all the faces, at the people who'd walked past her, at the people who'd seen her and Lily and kept moving. She didn't look angry. She didn't look scared. She just looked tired. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and clear, those same carefully chosen words she'd practiced for so long. My name is Emily Bennett. I'm 10 years old, and for 2 weeks, my sister and I lived in the Fifth Avenue corridor while she got sicker and sicker. She paused, gathering her thoughts. A lot of people have been asking what happened to us. What happened to my dad? What happened to Lily? Everyone wants to know who did this. Emily looked down at her hands briefly, then back up. But I don't think that's the right question. The room seemed to hold its breath. My dad didn't hurt us on purpose. He was sick too, just in a different way. He tried to help and he failed. And I tried to take care of Lily and I failed too. Her voice remained steady, but emotion was building beneath it. Every single day we sat in that corridor, hundreds of people walked past us. I would watch them. I would hope that maybe this time someone would stop. Someone would ask if we were okay. Someone would see that Lily was really, really sick. Emily's eyes moved across the crowd, making contact with individuals. Some of you looked at us. Some of you even seemed worried. One person brought us water, but then everyone kept walking, because you thought someone else would help. You thought it wasn't your job. You thought we were probably fine. A woman in the audience started crying quietly. Emily continued, I don't blame you for walking. I understand why you did, because it's hard to get involved. It's hard to ask questions. It's easier to believe everything is okay. She took a breath. But here's what I learned sitting in that corridor. Everyone was waiting for someone else to do something. The people walking by thought the security guards would help. The security guards thought the police would notice. The police thought social services was handling it, and social services didn't even know we existed anymore. Her voice grew stronger. So everybody saw us, and nobody helped us. Not because you were bad people, but because you were all waiting for someone else to be the one. Judge Lawson watched Emily with profound respect. This child was articulating something most adults struggled to understand. Emily looked directly at the audience now, her young face carrying a wisdom it should never have needed. Everybody keeps asking, what happened to my sister? Who hurt her? Who's responsible? She paused, and in that pause the entire room leaned forward. But we didn't get sick because someone hurt us. We got sick because nobody stopped. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward. So maybe, Emily said quietly, the question isn't, who did this? Maybe the question is, who didn't do anything when they could have? The silence that followed was different from before, heavier, more profound, because Emily had just shifted the entire framework. She'd moved the question from individual blame to collective responsibility. She wasn't accusing. She was simply stating a truth everyone had been avoiding. I'm not asking you to feel guilty, Emily continued, her voice soft now. I'm just asking you to remember what it looks like when someone needs help, and to not wait for someone else to be the one who stops. She looked at Judge Lawson. That's all I wanted to say. Emily stepped down from the stool and walked back to her seat. Mrs. Chen put an arm around her shoulders as Emily sat down, suddenly looking very small and very young. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The weight of a 10-year-old's words hung in the air, impossible to escape. Judge Lawson finally broke the silence, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Emily, for your courage and for your wisdom. She looked out at the crowd, at the lowered heads, the tear-stained faces, the people wrestling with their own consciences. Emily has asked us the right question. Not who did this, but who didn't do anything. And the answer is most of us. Not out of cruelty, but out of assumption, out of convenience, out of the comfort of believing someone else would handle it. She stood. This hearing is concluded. But the real work, the work of answering Emily's question, that starts now. As people filed out silently, something had fundamentally changed. The question was no longer about David Bennett. It was about all of them. 3 months after the hearing, there were no miraculous transformations, no Hollywood endings, just small, slow steps forward. Lily was released from medical care. Her kidney function had stabilized. The swelling was gone. She'd gained weight, and her cheeks had color again. She still didn't talk much, but she laughed sometimes now, a sound her foster mother treasured. She was placed in the same home as Emily. The sisters shared a room by choice. Some nights, Emily would wake to find Lily standing beside her bed. Bad dream, Emily would whisper. Lily would nod and climb into bed beside her, and Emily would hold her the way she'd done in the corridor, but this time, in a warm bed, in a safe place. Emily was back in school full-time. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed she still sat too straight, still watched everything too carefully. But slowly, very slowly, Emily was learning to relax. One afternoon, Emily forgot her homework folder at home. She froze, panic flooding her face. Mrs. Rodriguez knelt beside her desk. Emily, it's okay. Everyone forgets things sometimes. But I'm supposed to remember. No, sweetheart. You're supposed to be 10 years old. And 10-year-olds forget homework sometimes. It's normal. Emily stared at her, processing this foreign concept, that forgetting could be normal, that she didn't have to be perfect. I'm not in trouble, not even a little bit. Something in Emily's shoulders released, just slightly. David Bennett remained in the supervised treatment facility. He'd been diagnosed with major depressive disorder and post-traumatic stress. He attended therapy 3 times a week and was on medication that was slowly lifting the fog. He wasn't absolved. He wasn't forgiven by everyone, but he was being treated as what he was, a person who'd failed catastrophically while suffering from untreated mental illness. The court had mandated supervised treatment rather than incarceration. David would remain under monitoring, with gradual supervised contact with his daughters if, and only if, his treatment progressed successfully. He'd seen Emily twice now, in carefully supervised visits. The first time, he couldn't stop crying. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Emily had sat across from him, quiet and watchful. Finally, she'd said, I know you didn't mean to hurt us. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was acknowledgement. A beginning. The Fifth Avenue corridor looked different now. The memorial remained, but the city had added something else. A simple bench with a plaque that read, Rest here, notice here, care here, and people did. A community outreach program had been established. Volunteers walked through the corridor daily, trained to notice and offer help. Not to police, just to see. A woman with kind eyes approached a teenager sitting alone one afternoon. Hi there. Are you waiting for someone? Do you need help? The teenager looked up, surprised. I'm just waiting for my mom. She's at the doctor's office upstairs. Okay, just wanted to make sure. There's a warm waiting area inside if you'd prefer. Thanks. Small interactions. Simple questions. But they mattered. The coffee shop owner, Rosa, started a program. Any child who came in alone could get water and a snack. No questions asked. A small card by the register read, Kids drink free. Always. Michael Chen, the man who'd left water, now volunteered with the outreach program 3 times a week. He'd never forgiven himself for walking away, so instead, he made sure he never did it again. Officer Daniel Rivera continued his patrols, but he walked differently now, slower, looking more carefully. One morning he noticed an elderly man sitting on the ground, looking confused. "Sir, are you all right? Do you need help?" The man looked up, disoriented. I can't remember where I parked." Daniel called for medical assistance, suspecting a cognitive issue. The man was evaluated and connected with senior services. A small intervention, but it mattered. Detective Laura Brennan had pushed for systemic changes. The school district now had mandatory follow-up protocols for extended absences. Social services had hired additional caseworkers. The safety net was being slowly, carefully repaired. Not perfect, but better. Judge Lawson had mandated that everyone involved in Emily and Lily's case, every person who'd walked past, every system that had failed, attend quarterly community accountability meetings. Not to punish, but to remember. At the most recent meeting, Michael Chen had shared, "I still see those girls every day when I walk through that corridor, and I still feel the weight of walking past them. But now I stop. Every time I see someone who might need help, I stop." Others nodded, because they were all carrying the same weight, the weight of a question that couldn't be unanswered. Who didn't do anything when they could have? And the only way to carry that weight was to make different choices now. No miracles, no perfect endings, just people learning slowly and painfully what Emily had tried to teach them, that seeing isn't enough, that assuming someone else will help is how children die in plain sight, that the distance between noticing and acting is where responsibility lives, and that closing that distance, even imperfectly, is how communities heal. 6 months later. It was a Saturday morning in early spring, the kind of day when the city felt softer somehow, the harsh edges smoothed by warm sunlight and gentle breezes. Emily and Lily sat on a bench at Riverside Park with their foster mother, Mrs. Chen. They'd been with her long enough now that foster was starting to feel like just a word. What mattered was that they were safe, fed, held. Lily had run ahead to the playground. She climbed onto the swings, pumping her legs with determined joy. Her laughter carried across the park, bright and clear and so beautifully ordinary. Emily sat on the bench, watching. Mrs. Chen noticed. "You don't have to watch her every second, sweetheart. She's safe here." "I know," Emily said, but old habits were hard to break. Still, something was different today. Emily wasn't rigid, wasn't counting exits, wasn't scanning for danger in every shadow. She was just sitting, watching her sister play. "Want to join her?" Mrs. Chen asked gently. Emily considered this. For months, playing had felt impossible, childish, a luxury she couldn't afford. But today, something loosened inside her. "Maybe," she said softly. And then, taking a breath, Emily stood and walked toward the swings. Lily's face lit up when she saw her. "Emmy, push me." Emily smiled, a real smile, not the careful one she'd practiced, and pushed the swing. Lily shrieked with delight, her red hair flying behind her. For a moment, they were just two sisters, playing, being. Nearby, an elderly woman paused on her morning walk. She watched the two girls on the swings, something familiar tugging at her memory. Then she recognized them. The red hair, the faces she'd seen in the news months ago, the girls from the corridor. The woman's first instinct was to keep walking, to give them privacy, to not intrude. But then she remembered Emily's words from the hearing, words that had been playing in her mind for months. "We got sick because nobody stopped." The woman approached slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. "Excuse me," she said to Mrs. Chen. "I don't mean to intrude, but are those the Bennett sisters?" Mrs. Chen tensed slightly, protective. "Yes." "Why do you ask?" "Because I walked past them," the woman said quietly, her eyes filling with tears. "In the corridor, multiple times, and I kept walking." She looked at Emily and Lily playing. "I just wanted to say, I'm so glad they're okay, and I'm sorry I didn't stop." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Thank you for telling me." The woman nodded and turned to leave, but Emily had noticed the exchange. She walked over, curious. "Were you talking about us?" The elderly woman looked at Emily, this child who'd carried so much. "Yes, sweetheart. I was just telling your mother that I'm glad you're doing well." Emily studied her for a moment, then said simply, Thank you for stopping now. The woman's tears spilled over. Such a small act of grace from someone who'd been failed so profoundly. Across the park, other small moments were unfolding. A jogger noticed a man sitting alone, looking distressed. She stopped. Sir, are you all right? Do you need help? A teenager saw a lost child crying near the fountain. He knelt down. Hey, buddy, let's find your parents together, okay? A mother watched another child sitting alone on a bench and approached. Hi there. Are you waiting for someone? Simple questions. Small interventions. The kind that had been missing 6 months ago. As the afternoon wore on, Emily and Lily played until they were exhausted. They collapsed on the grass side by side, watching clouds drift overhead. That one looks like a rabbit, Lily said, pointing. I see it, Emily replied. They were quiet for a moment. Then Lily asked, Emmy, are we going to be okay? Emily thought about this, about everything they'd been through, about the corridor, about their father's absence, about the uncertainty still ahead. But she also thought about this moment, the warm grass beneath them, the sky above, Mrs. Chen watching over them with gentle care, the playground full of children, the strangers who now stopped to ask if people needed help. Yeah, Emily said softly, I think we are. And for the first time in a very long time, she believed it. As the sun began to set, Mrs. Chen gathered the girls to head home. They walked through the park slowly, Lily skipping ahead, Emily walking beside her foster mother. Near the park entrance, Emily noticed the memorial bench they'd passed earlier, one of many the city had installed. The plaque read, In memory of what we failed to see, may we choose to look more carefully. Emily stopped and read it again. Mrs. Chen stood beside her. You know what I think that really means? What? That looking, really looking, is an act of love. It's choosing to see people, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means getting involved. Emily nodded slowly. Like Officer Rivera did. Exactly like Officer Rivera did. They stood there for a moment, then Lily called back, Come on, I'm hungry. Emily smiled and took Mrs. Chen's hand. Together, they walked home. Closing scene. That evening, as streetlights flickered on across the city, the Fifth Avenue corridor hummed with its usual activity. Commuters heading home, shift workers starting their nights, the constant flow of urban life. But now, volunteers in bright vests walked among them, eyes open, presence steady. A young woman sat against the wall, looking exhausted. A volunteer approached. Hi there, are you okay? Do you need anything? The woman looked up, surprised. I just missed my bus, I'm just resting. There's a warming station 2 blocks that way if you need a place to sit. And here, the volunteer handed her a card. Resources if you need help with anything. Thank you, the woman said softly. Such a small moment, but in a city that had learned painfully what happens when everyone keeps walking. Small moments were everything, because sometimes salvation isn't dramatic. It's just someone stopping long enough to ask, Are you okay? And caring enough to wait for the answer. The end final message. Sometimes it's not cruelty that destroys a family. It's the polite, comfortable, collective silence when everyone sees and waits for someone else to do something. This is a story about aging, caring, losing, failing, and remembering that looking is still an act of love.